What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. Hope you're happy, safe, healthy. Want to wish you a very happy third day. That's right. It is the third day, Thursday, January the 23rd, 2025, here for my bi-weekly show in the Bleacher Report app. You can watch live every single Tuesday and Thursday in the Bleacher Report app exclusively. You can also check it out after the fact, of course, on demand in the Bleacher Report app, the very best app in the world of sports. I use it to keep track of all my favorite sports teams. Shout out to Man United. Shout out to Bruno Fernandes getting it done. If you follow me right down below in the Bleacher Report app, you can obviously see all the teams that I root for, which include the Arizona State Sun Devils. Sam Levitt getting some love today. Love to see that from On3. You can also see that I root for the Dallas Cowboys, which is my curse, and one that I have in common with you. You can check this show out also, by the way, on demand on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe over there if you're watching it on the tube of you. Twice a week, all throughout 2025, 3 times a week once the regular season gets here and our post-game shows get started up. But we have a long way to go until we get there. And before we can even think about the road to establishing any kind of thought on the 2025 season for the Dallas Cowboys, we have to establish some thoughts on the head coach. As of now, today, Thursday, once again, the third day, was the 9th business day, full, because it's past 5 p.m. It's 6 p.m. Central Standard Time as I'm live. It was the 9th full business day. I guess full is a little bit of a stretch, but it was effectively the 9th business day in which the Dallas Cowboys were looking for a brand new coach. The Cowboys, of course, moving on, parting ways, however you want to term it, with Mike McCarthy last Monday. They went all the week of the divisional round, and they have now gone almost all of the entire week of the conference championship week. And we'll see if the Cowboys come to some sort of term, some sort of resolution by Friday afternoon. It was reported earlier on Thursday that could/would happen. Who knows? We're here to kind of get caught up on it all and explain how finally, at long last, on the 9th full day of things, there is a plan that, at the very least, I don't want to speak for you, but at the very least, I do not hate. There's a plan that, look, let's be honest with ourselves, you and me. That's what this conversation is right now, right? And if you want to comment along, I certainly encourage that. But we're looking for something to cope ourselves into believing, right? We're looking for that copium. We know our life as Dallas Cowboys fans. We're not naive. We're not dumb. We're not stupid. We understand the cross that we bear. We understand what this situation is. But give us something, because we're creative enough in a pathetic sense to start to kind of cope with. And we can find a way. We've coped ourselves into believing that Jason Garrett-led teams have a chance to win the Super Bowl. So we can do it if you give us something to work with. We just need the slab of marble. We will be Michelangelo with the world of cope. We are artists when it comes to coping, and we will do that if you provide the proper material. And I believe that we have finally gotten there. Now, let's look at what happened all day on Thursday, to be specific. Let me close this ad for you here. It's about Aaron Glenn, who is the now head coach of the New York Jets, not the Dallas Cowboys, whatever. The highlighted portion you're looking at here is where Thursday begins. This is our tracker, by the way, at bloggingtheboys.com. We keep track of big things like this that are happening, constantly updating this article, so make sure you bookmark it. I tweet it out all the time, whatever. Free agency, undrafted free agency, draft stuff. We have trackers for all the big-time things. But that being said, this was all the action on Thursday. First thing, Thursday brought with it word that the Cowboys could cross the finish line with Schottenheimer before Friday's end. Talking about, of course, I was going to say Brian Schottenheimer. Anyway, so here's the article. This was earlier in the day on Thursday. Report: Dallas Cowboys could cross the finish line on hiring Brian Schottenheimer by Friday. This came by way of DLLS's Clarence Hill, the great Clarence Hill, the great Chill, tweeted out, "Look for the Cowboys to cross the finish line on bringing Brian Schottenheimer, no later than Friday, possibly today." Now, I see you, Bobby1189. We're going to get there in a moment. Says, let's hire Pete Carroll. I promise we're going to come back to this point, but just kind of setting the stage here. This was when we were down bad. I mean, if you were a part of Cowboys Twitter on Thursday afternoon, our pets' heads were falling off. We were SpongeBob and Patrick running around screaming. It was really, really, really bad because it started to seem like this was inevitable. So that was the first thing that came out on Thursday. Then we got this weird report. There was a Josina Anderson report, and let me get this up on your screen now. This is Josina's tweet. Where is it? Goodness gracious, I've lost it. Here we go. Nope, this was not it. I can't find it now. But Josina Anderson reported that there was an informal conversation that the Cowboys had that was, here we go. I can't believe I knew it was here. I scrolled past that. I was too excited. Josina Anderson, this is Thursday afternoon. After we've all kind of accepted, we've begun to maybe potentially cope with the Brian Schottenheimer world. Josina Anderson notes, keep in mind the Cowboys have also had informal conversations, this ad is driving me crazy, with at least one other head coach prospect, and she noted that she was aware of regarding their head coach vacancy. Deion Sanders is not the only one in said category. Now, this is important context because Deion has not been officially formally interviewed by the Cowboys, so you have to classify him as an informal conversation. But Justina was noting that, hey, there's another informal name. There's another name that goes in that Deion group, and she obviously wasn't reporting who it was. Then we got this weird report that came by way of Pro Football Post, but my guy Joe Hoyt, also from DLLS, added, Canton confirmed via a source that the Cowboys have had emphasis there, some level of interest in Rich Bisaccia, who spent 5 seasons in Dallas as special teams coach, 2013 through 17, before he left to join the Las Vegas Raiders. We all know how that ended. He was interim. They should have hired him. They didn't. Then he wound up with the Green Bay Packers. Another person that Jones is like. Not sure how much far that interest could go, however. So then it kind of felt like, okay, well, they're just talking to dudes they know because they just want to talk to Rich Bisaccia and Kellen Moore and Brian Schottenheimer, whatever. But then we finally got something. Again, if you're looking for a way to cope, I have presented it here for you. Bobby1189 beat me to the punch, says it was reported in our tracker on Thursday by the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that Jerry Jones has made contact with Pete Carroll. We've got articles and information available for all these things at bloggingtheboys.com. You should obviously be checking it out 24/7, 365. I'm a company man. Here's the report from Nick Harris, great guy, friend of the show as well. Notes in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. The Star-Telegram has confirmed that Jones, talking about Jerry, not Steven or Jerry Jr., has made contact with former Seattle Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll regarding the opening. The conversation has been described as informal, so this kind of jives with what Justina reported, having another informal candidate. Who knows about the Rich Bisaccia of it all? Although the interest is legitimate enough to be reported, according to another source. There are no set plans for a formal interview as of Thursday afternoon. So this was Nick's report in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Afterwards, we had all the members of the local media jumping all over this, reporting it themselves, doing their jobs. Everybody's saying, yeah, there's been an informal conversation. They chatted, they talked, they whatever, they texted, I don't know, they slid into DMs, blah, 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 but it was not a formal interview. Now, the Rich Bisaccia thing, by the way, just to kind of step back for a second, that could be something to keep an eye on. Because if the Cowboys had a conversation with Rich Bisaccia about being their potential head coach, unlike Pete Carroll, Rich Bisaccia is currently employed by an NFL team. He's currently employed by the Green Bay Packers. The Dallas Cowboys would have had to have requested permission from the Green Bay Packers to interview him. And if they didn't, they could be subject to penalties, subject to discipline, a draft pick lost. They've already basically thrown away a draft pick by way of the Jonathan Mingo trade. So that is something to just put a bookmark in for another day. Today, though, we are focusing on the Dallas Cowboys getting a head coach. And Bobby1189 notes, let's hire Pete Carroll. I'm going to say it right now. We're 8 minutes into this thing. This is far and away. There is a cavern between this and the next option for me. This is the best possible option that the Dallas Cowboys have for themselves. And I believe that it is actually within the realm of possibility. Now, it's important to qualify all of that by saying that we follow the Dallas Cowboys. We root for the Dallas Cowboys. So we understand that things that are within the realm of possibility for practical and normal teams and people aren't really, it's not the case for the Dallas Cowboys, right? Like anytime you get your hopes up relative to something like this, they prove that they're the Dallas Cowboys and they're cheap and they do the easy thing, the comfortable thing, the we like our own guys thing, blah, 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 blah. But that being said, if we do the windy meme here and start connecting all of these dots, let's figure out why this makes sense. Now, let me be very clear here. If you had asked me 9 business days ago if Pete Carroll was the guy that I wanted to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, I would have told you absolutely not. I would have said there's no way. I do not want this whatsoever. You just fired or moved on from Mike McCarthy. You don't need to do this. You don't need to go with another retread just because you wanted to make a change at the most important position or job title relative to your organization. But that's neither here nor there. We are down the rabbit hole, guys. All right. We are so deep down the rabbit hole that I'm looking for anything. I am like Bane trying to get out of the cave, right? Like I am just trying to find a way to sunlight. And Pete Carroll is a step on the ladder. He's the first plateau that we can reach to hopefully pull off the heroism that, Bruce Wayne ultimately does himself. Like that's where we're at here. So this is not a good idea in terms of measuring it within or against logic and reason. this is a tremendous idea relative to the world that we currently occupy as Dallas Cowboys fans, which is why it has now become the singular piece of hope that we are coping ourselves into believing is actually possible. So what do we know? We know that the Dallas Cowboys really like Brian Schottenheimer. Why? I don't know. But we know that. I see you possibly, Tony Romo, in the chat. Let's get your comment on the screen. It says, give me Carroll, proven winner, and allows Witten to actually learn from a winning coach, not a dud like Schotty. All right, you guys are getting ahead of me. I like this. Okay. Also, Rich is very respected. That I wouldn't hate that as long as he killed the coordinator hires. I don't know. Maybe you meant Pete. I don't know if you had an autocorrect there. Talking about obviously talking about Pete Carroll here. Maybe Pete is very respected, and I wouldn't hate that as long as he killed the coordinator hires. I think that's what you meant. I'm going to assume so. Larry Alette says Pete Carroll as head coach. Yes. Then I'm okay with Schotty as play caller. This is where we're at. Now, I tweeted this out myself. Let me put this comment back on the screen. Okay, we're good. I tweeted out, ideal world. In fact, let me put my tweet up on the screen for you here, just to kind of lay it all out, put some kind of visual to this for you. Sharing screen now. Here we go. If you haven't followed me on Twitter yet, I consider it a personal offense, by the way, to all of you. So I tweeted out, imagine a world where Pete Carroll is the head coach and culture setter. Schotty, talking about Brian Schottenheimer here, gets to call the plays, and I put fine, whatever. And I was like, in my mind when I wrote that, I was like, whatever, fine. You want to call the plays? Cool. Go ahead, dude. At this point, and I got some pushback. This is what I'm talking about here. Some people were like, no, I don't want Brian Schottenheimer to call the plays. Dude, you have to accept that Brian Schottenheimer is going to be on this staff to some serious degree. I think we all have had to kind of cross that bridge. It's like my son is 3 years old. You got to eat your vegetables, dude. If you want to eat some cake or something like that, we can talk and we can negotiate, but you've got to eat the vegetables. Like that has to happen. So this is truly the Brussels sprouts of the meal. It has to be consumed at some point. We have to make our peace with that. But if we can structure it in the right way and put it on the part of the plate that we don't have to pay full and total amount of attention to, then we can stomach it, no pun intended, a little bit easier. That being said, Project 82, which I have dubbed the Jason Witten experience, can get underway, as you all noted in the comment section. And to that point, Jason Witten, look, again, I don't mean anything negative against Brian Schottenheimer. And I feel kind of bad for Brian Schottenheimer that he's been made fun of a lot on the internet for the last few days. It's not his fault that he's thinking about taking a potential job. I mean, who wouldn't take that job? That being said, Brian Schottenheimer is not Pete Carroll. Now, Pete Carroll has not been Pete Carroll for a very long time. I think we all understand and agree with that. But that being said, Pete Carroll is still a world of a difference from Brian Schottenheimer here and today. And there's a lot that Jason Witten, if he truly, truly, truly is the chosen one, you know, the Anakin Skywalker of this whole thing, at least let's go find Obi-Wan, right? Like at least get Obi-Wan for him to learn from as opposed to Jar Jar. Like that's kind of where I'm at here. So CB Jonesy 17 says, let BS Brian Schottenheimer be the quarterback coach and get a proven OC, especially since Dak likes him so much. Now I think you're asking for too much. Now, to be clear, you're not asking for too much in a world of logic and reason, but we understand the world that we're living in here. We're in a house of mirrors here, B. Jonesy. All right, we're trying to find our way out here. Some of it looks wavy. Some of it looks weird. We don't want to keep bumping into the walls. We just want to get out of this place. And the closest, most practical, most possible way out is Pete Carroll as head coach. And Brian Schottenheimer, you want to be the offensive coordinator? Fine, whatever. In fact, he has been the offensive coordinator, which is why this all kind of, I'm going to use the term makes sense, but I don't mean that in the way that most people normally mean it. I don't think this makes sense in like a, this is a good idea way. I think this makes sense if we're trying to connect the dots off of what we know from the Dallas Cowboys head coaching search so far. It was reported earlier in the week after the Cowboys had their super love fest with Brian Schottenheimer. It was reported by NFL Network's Jane Slater, friend of the show, friend of Blogging the Boys, that the Cowboys also interviewed him for offensive coordinator. Why would you be doing that? Why would you be interviewing Brian Schottenheimer to be your offensive coordinator and not your head coach, besides the fact that he's already been your offensive coordinator for 2 years? It doesn't make logical sense that Brian Schottenheimer would have been the offensive coordinator for, say, Kellen Moore, because Kellen Moore, if he were to ever be the head coach of the Cowboys or anybody else, presumably would want to call the plays himself. So Brian Schottenheimer is on record for wanting to call plays in his next opportunity as offensive coordinator. So why would he stick around to be the offensive coordinator for another guy who's going to call the plays himself? So if we kind of follow this line of thought, I see you, Bobby 1189 says Pete Carroll is by far our best option. I think he could really help Dak. I kind of don't care at this point. Again, I'm not pushing back on you, Bobby 1189, but I really just am trying to I'm trying to minimize the damage. It's, not so much trying to help anybody right now. We're in disaster territory right now. We're at DEFCON 1. Like the sirens are going off all day, every single day. We're just trying to get to a place where the sea level kind of rests and the alarms stop blaring. That's where we're at relative to this whole situation, because if Brian Schottenheimer is the hire, those sirens are going to be going off for the life of his contract. But if Pete Carroll comes in, maybe you can luck yourself into being good. Maybe it can happen. It's possible. Some doors are a little bit more open or less closed to you than they would be if you go with Brian Schottenheimer, which is why this whole thing represents an actual possible future. Not one, again, that any of us are going to act like, oh, the Dallas Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl, but it is possible. So when we think about what we know about this search so far, again, we know that Brian Schottenheimer wants to be, if he's at least going to be an offensive coordinator, somebody who calls the plays. We know that Brian Schottenheimer has a history of working with Pete Carroll. We know that the Dallas Cowboys seemingly want to institute what I affectionately dubbed Project 82, which is Jason Witten becoming the heir, the successor, the whatever you want to call it. So he needs someone to learn from. No offense. Again, Brian Schottenheimer is not that dude. He's not that person. Pete Carroll, say what you want, think what you want, whatever about his collegiate run. The dude is very, very, very well documented for being an incredible coach at both the collegiate and professional levels. I don't care what the NCAA has said about any stupid things and vacated titles or whatever the case may be. He is one of one. If there's anyone who you want Jason Witten to learn from, if you are just dead set on him becoming the head coach someday, he can certainly learn from Pete Carroll about how to run a program, how to run an institution, how to run a collective, how to run an army of players, whatever you want to call it. Again, there is a wealth of knowledge to be obtained from someone like Pete Carroll relative to someone like Brian Schottenheimer. And I don't mean this in any negative way, but the word that we keep hearing from the Cowboys or through, other people from the Cowboys is that they really respect Brian Schottenheimer because of his NFL legacy and who his father was. And there's no doubt that Marty Schottenheimer was one of the greatest coaches to ever be in the NFL. But again, with all due respect, Brian Schottenheimer is not his father. I mean, we can't sit here and act like Steve Belichick is Bill Belichick. We can't sit here and say that, Arch Manning will be, what his uncles have been or his grandfather was, right? Like, these are different people at the end of the day. So instead of hoping that you can get some semblance of who Marty Schottenheimer was from Brian Schottenheimer for Jason Witten, like, think about the game of telephone that you're already playing, the degrees of separation that you're at to just hope that it all works out. You can tap right into the source of Pete Carroll. And if we also think about this in practical, fair, legitimate terms, we know that Pete Carroll, given his age, is not showing up. Again, this is an assumption, but for like this 10-year run. So if you do want Jason Witten to be the head coach in, 3 years or whatever the case may be, that kind of lines up with what Pete Carroll's looking for, doesn't it? Like, in our assumptive sort of way. So Pete Carroll is head coach, culture setter, walk around guy, CEO, whatever you want to call him. There is no option in terms of what is available to us that can be better. None, not a singular one. Again, I'm not pumped about this. I'm not saying this is an amazing idea, but right now, we decided to go shopping for the groceries the night before Thanksgiving. All right. There's no more turkey. All right. Like, we screwed ourselves. Like, that was our bad. We didn't come in time. We didn't pay attention when people told us to go get groceries, get ahead of everything. So right now we're debating a can of tuna or, some frozen pizzas. Like, that's where we're at here. I'd rather take the frozen pizzas. I hope that it was obvious that frozen pizza was meant to be the better option of those two things. I'd rather take what we can make the biggest, best, most delectable meal out of, because we can't do it out of a can of tuna. Like, that's just simply where we're at. We're trying to make the best situation out of this poor mess that the Dallas Cowboys have done to themselves. I mean, think about it. We're on the verge, I would assume, again, we're assuming a lot of things here, of the Jaguars hiring Liam Cohen after that crazy twist of events. So pretty soon, you're going to be one of 3 teams left in this game of musical chairs. It's going to be you, the New Orleans Saints, and the Las Vegas Raiders. And as if it weren't painfully obvious at this point in time, this is not great company to be in. You don't want to be associated with teams like this in terms of accomplishments or line of thinking or levels of logic. And what's more is one of these other 2 teams might wind up hiring the guy that you moved on from in Mike McCarthy. So I absolutely, in all worlds, want the Dallas Cowboys to move forward. Now I'm putting 2 more tweets on your screen so we can fully kind of tie a bow on this situation, and my computer just freaked out. That was a little bit interesting. That's one tweet. Now let me pull this second one. Where is it? This was from my friend Ty Dunn, who had an incredible write-up about the Cowboys and the situation that they find themselves in. Of course, the moment that I begin to look for it, now I can't find it. That's just the way these things tend to go. Here we are, where we are. It was right here a moment ago. What happened? I mean, my goodness. Here we go. Finally. Goodness gracious. All right. So I've got 2 tweets up on the screen for you that are about to have 2 tweets up on the screen for you. Here we go. Here's number 1. This is from, before I get there, the comment here from possibly Tony Romo, leaving us on edge here. It says, I really wish Jerry wasn't so concerned with familiarity and wanted to give young, creative guys a shot. Very jealous of Chicago and Jacksonville front offices for giving those kind of guys shots. To your point, though, possibly Tony Romo, I also, look, we're in a dark place, or we're jealous, because I agree with you. We're jealous. We're painfully jealous of the Bears. Think about that. Like, think about the pits of despair that we occupy, that we are looking up at the Bears and we're saying, man, y'all got it good. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy that that's the case. And even the Jaguars, right? Up until, yesterday, the world was dragging the Jaguars for continually hanging on to Trent Baalke, right? We all could kind of see, you didn't have to be some national insider to understand that that was this impediment in their whole process and why Liam Cohen withdrew from consideration for the job. And what did Jaguars ownership do? Even the Jaguars, who are so down low and down bad as a franchise, even the Jaguars said, you know what? This thing that we really like, obviously the thing was Trent Baalke. We really like Trent Baalke, but you know what? Trent Baalke is serving as a barrier to us having success as a football team. So we really like him, but we're going to move on because we want to succeed at any cost. So I agree with you totally, possibly Tony Romo, because the Bears obviously hired Ben Johnson, and it seems like the Jaguars are going to hire Liam Cohen at the time that this show is airing. But beyond that, relative to the Jaguars specifically, the Jaguars also said, all right, this roadblock, we're getting rid of it. And yeah, we are doing it too late in this process. We should have done it a long time ago, but we're moving on and we're going to find a way to be better. We're committed to being better. We're all so jealous of that disposition relative to for the Dallas Cowboys as it relates to the Cowboys, if that isn't obvious. So, all right, let's take a look at Jane's tweet here. Here it is on your screen. Again, Jane is awesome. She tweeted this out. Here's the deal. Let me zoom out because I don't think you can see the whole thing. There you go. Here's the deal. This was a few hours ago now at the time of this airing. Here's the deal. No unanimous decision yet in Dallas. There have been informal talks and picking of brains from the likes of Pete Carroll, Deion Sanders, and there was even a chat with Rich Bisaccia. This tweet, I think, kind of encapsulates where we're at, which is why I wanted to show it. Brian Schottenheimer seems to have the most steam, but things remain fluid. There are reasons the above aren't legitimate contenders, but Jerry Jones is certainly talking to a lot more people than he did the last search. This is the line that I wanted to talk about here. And I'm not disagreeing with Jane. She's awesome and wonderful and great at her job. And again, is a great friend of Blogging the Voices. But think about the 4 people who the Cowboys have interviewed from a formal perspective. The 4 people who the Cowboys have interviewed formally. Let me take her tweet off the screen now just to finish it up. It says, talks internally continue today as we wait based on multiple phone calls with several parties involved. Great. Okay. The 4 people who the Cowboys have interviewed formally. I lost my thought. I was so worked up. We've got Kellen Moore, Robert Saleh, Leslie Frazier, and Brian Schottenheimer. That's it. Those are the 4 names. Of these 4, 2 of them are former staffers of the Cowboys, obviously. Kellen Moore, who was a recent not only offensive coordinator, but quarterbacks coach and player for the team. Basically, his entire NFL life outside of 2 years has been spent with the Dallas Cowboys. I know he was on the Lions too, but you get my point. Obviously, Brian Schottenheimer has been on the Cowboys staff for the last 3 years. He's in-house. Okay, so first of all, 50% of the 4 candidates that they have interviewed formally have been on their staff in very recent history. The other 2 candidates, I'm not pointing any fingers or making any assumptions here or making any accusations, but the other 2 candidates help them satisfy the Rooney Rule, help them be in compliance with the Rooney Rule. Again, not making any accusations or insinuating anything, but they did. So those are the 4 candidates who they have interviewed from a formal perspective. If we expand to include the informal candidates, the people who have been mentioned, there are a handful of other names who have been mentioned to varying degrees. Deion Sanders is obviously one of them. Jason Witten is another. Rich Bisaccia was a name that was thrown out. I suppose you could put Cliff Kingsbury on that list if you really want to. And now we can add Pete Carroll to that list. Deion Sanders, former player of the Dallas Cowboys, someone whom the Joneses know very well. Jason Witten, we could say the exact same things for him. Cliff Kingsbury, again, that has never really felt as serious as any of these other options. Obviously, Rich Bisaccia was also on the Cowboys staff, and now we're talking about Pete Carroll. So of the 5 informal ones, we're talking about 3 of them that have some level of association to the Cowboys. This isn't, I recognize that from a quantitative standpoint, the Cowboys are talking to more people than they did the last time. In case you don't know, or if you forgot, when the Cowboys hired Mike McCarthy, they interviewed 2 people, him and Marvin Lewis. And at the time, you only had to interview 1 minority candidate to satisfy the Rooney Rule, and they interviewed Marvin Lewis. That checked it off, and then they hired Mike McCarthy. So yes, from a numerical, quantitative standpoint, the Cowboys are indeed talking to more people this time around. But 2 of the 4 people who they have interviewed formally are people they know really well. And 3 of the 5 people that they have talked to or been connected to in an informal way. And that's 3 of 5 if we add Cliff Kingsbury to this list. I don't think he's really, on the same level. So if we take him off, that's 3 of 4 more. And Pete Carroll is the most recent development. So yes, they are talking to more people, but these are just their people. They're not talking to outside people. The most outside people they've spoken to in this process, whether formally or informally, are Robert Saleh and Leslie Frazier, who seemingly, may have been candidates to satisfy the Rooney Rule. And now you could add Cliff Kingsbury if you really want to, and Pete Carroll. Those are the only outside names that they have talked to. So yes, quantitatively, they're talking to more people, but qualitatively, they are not. They are not involving more outside opinions. They are keeping things in-house or relative to what they like, whether it's people like Deion Sanders or Jason Witten or Kellen Moore, people who they know to a serious degree. And I mentioned there was one more tweet I wanted to put up on your screen, but before I do, I see you all raised 96. Says, as a Cowboys fan since the early 2000s, John Kitna was my quarterback. John Kitna was your quarterback. Okay, we cannot sit here and look at personnel, but all eyes and blame has to be on the Joneses. The toxicity from our front office is unacceptable, and there needs to be a head coach candidate with a voice. I'm okay with Pete. I agree with you. Like in all these ways, at this point in time, Pete Carroll is the best option. And we're not happy about it, to be very clear, but we can tolerate this Project 82 if you get Pete Carroll involved. It's still a joke, but it is at the very least, a somewhat kind of serious joke. So that being said, there's one more tweet that I want to put up on your screen. It comes from Ty Dunn, who had an incredible article. You should go check it out. This was his tweet promoting the article, but he teased some information that was in it. Again, Ty's an incredible writer, incredible NFL voice. You absolutely should follow him and check him out. He's the best. But this is kind of a Spark Notes version of what he touched on in his long article, and we don't have all that much time to get into it. But this is where the Cowboys are at. And for anyone who tells you that you're being dramatic or you're being silly or you need to let it go or you need to move on or it's their team, blah, 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 think about the things that Ty Dunn, one of the most respected writers in the game, had to say about the Cowboys. Inside his article, again, go check it out. Follow him on Twitter, Ty Dunn. Why Mike McCarthy was fed up. It's different in Big D. Said one former Cowboys exec, it is almost like football is an afterthought. Jerry and Steven are all about the money and monetizing every aspect of the Cowboys. That gets frustrating. That gets distracting to get your job done. At the heart of the football problem is the lack of a compass. I want to come back to this, so don't forget. Jerry wants to spin. Steven does not. How the Cowboys whiffed on Derrick Henry. Fishing at the bottom of the ocean costs Dallas dearly. We'll hear coaches go on and on about the change in the culture at the Mike, Sally, the problems usually come much deeper, et cetera, et cetera. I want to touch on this before we get out of here. The lack of a compass. Something I said all last offseason throughout the lack of activity in free agency, the not signing their own players, the dragging their feet, extending Dak and CD, blah, blah, blah. People even still say things like, man, I think that they were, doing a soft rebuild. I think that they were just, organically tanking. And to that, I say, there's no way. And to that, I actually say, you're being ridiculous and you don't even understand. Because if the Cowboys were going to soft tank or we're going to rebuild, do you recognize that would require some level of thought, some level of planning, right? Like, the most famous tank in recent memory across sports is the 76ers, or you could use my Houston Astros as an example, right? In each of those cases, those teams had a plan. It was a multi-step plan. It was, okay, we're going to be really bad, and then we're going to gather these assets, and then we're going to do this. I mean, you get my point. It was A, B, C, D, E. There were several steps to an actual plan. Nothing the Dallas Cowboys did last offseason worked together. Sure, if they had not paid Dak and CD, and then they had wound up not paying them, then I would buy that they were truly committed to tanking. They were going to let Dak walk in free agency, whatever the case may be. But they didn't do that. They acted completely, totally from all sides of the spectrum. By not being active in free agency, they supported the idea that they wanted to tank. By bringing players back like Zeke, they supported the idea that they wanted to tank. But then by paying CD, by paying Dak, they proved that they wanted to win now or be all in or whatever the case may be. So they don't have, Ty used the phrase a compass. And what I said was they don't have a North Star. If you want to tank, if you want to be bad, I disagree with that. I don't think that you're in a position to do that as a roster, but at the very least, be all in. And I don't mean to bring that up again, but be all in one direction. Pick a lane and just stick in that lane. It's this constant hopscotching that is costing you over and over and over and over again. Possibly Tony Romo says, last thing I'll say, this is literally the best thing that could happen for Jerry. The media talks about this opening every single day. The Cowboys are in the media, and that's what he truly cares about. The last two outside hires, Parcells and Mike McCarthy, have been the most successful. That's a great point. Smith, 1986, says, hire Pete and he can bring Witten along, but hire Kellen as your OC because he's more innovative than the other guys that's available. You asked for just a bit too much. You know, that's I don't disagree with you, honestly, but at this point, if they hire Pete Carroll, we have some material to work with. That, again, that's really what I'm looking for here, and I think that's what we're all looking for. If you mess this up, if you hire Brian Schottenheimer, then everything underneath that is compromised, and we can't work with that whatsoever, and we're just doomed until you hire Jason Witten, and then we have to convince ourselves that that is some material that we can work with. You hire Pete Carroll, we can kind of maybe think our way out of this. That's we're at the place in the video game where we just need to pick up like one thing of life. You know what I'm saying? Like, because the next hit that we take, game's over. Like, that's where we're at. So we need to pick up just a little bit of life. And then, okay, we can let our health regenerate. We can take a breath. We can figure things out. We can look at the map. That's where we're at. Pete Carroll represents that to me. So hopefully the Dallas Cowboys are paying attention. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me all across social media, obviously. Email is rj.ochoa@sbnation.com. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below. I'll do my very best to get to those. If you're watching on Bleacher Report, make sure to follow me here in the Bleacher Report app. I'm live in the Bleacher Report app every single Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can obviously catch them on demand after the fact or on the Blog of the Boys YouTube channel after the fact. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your week and weekend. If the Cowboys do make a head coach hire between now and next Tuesday, I'll have a video up on the Blog of the Boys YouTube channel. But if not, I'll see you on Tuesday evening for our latest therapy session. So thanks so much for hanging out, everybody, and we'll see you next time.